He wasn't supposed to be there. Not on that road, not at that hour, and certainly not still alive. The wind moved low across the empty stretch of asphalt, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain, the kind that never quite reached the ground. Ethan Cole drove through it with one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely against the door, his eyes steady but tired, the quiet kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. It was just past midnight in a small Colorado town, the kind where streetlights flicker more than they shine and silence settles in like a second skin. He hadn't planned to be out this late, but plans hadn't meant much to him lately. Not since the house had gone quiet. Not since he'd stopped opening certain doors. The headlights cut a narrow path ahead, illuminating cracked pavement and the occasional tumbleweed drifting like something lost with no place to land. And then, out of nowhere, something moved. Ethan slowed instinctively, his foot easing onto the brake as a shape stepped into the edge of the light. At first, it looked like a shadow breaking free from the dark, and it lifted its head. A dog, a German shepherd, or what was left of one. Its frame was too thin, ribs pressing faintly against a coat dulled by dirt and time, its fur uneven, matted in places where the wind had done its worst. But it wasn't the condition that made Ethan pause. It was the stillness. The way it stood there, not flinching, not running, just watching him with eyes that caught the light like old amberglass. He rolled the truck to a stop. The engine idled low, a steady hum beneath the silence. For a moment, neither of them moved. Ethan leaned forward slightly, narrowing his gaze. "You lost, buddy," he muttered, more to himself than to the animal. The dog didn't respond, didn't wag its tail, didn't make a sound. It just held his gaze, unblinking, as if measuring something deeper than distance or fear. Ethan exhaled slowly, the breath fogging faintly against the windshield. He'd seen strays before, plenty of them. Most ran at the first sign of headlights. The smart ones did. This one didn't. This one waited. After a beat, Ethan shifted the truck into gear and eased forward, giving the dog space to move. It didn't. It stepped aside just enough to let him pass, then turned its head, tracking him as he drove by. In the rearview mirror, Ethan watched it shrink into the darkness. Just another shadow on an empty road. He should have kept driving. And for a few seconds, he did. The road stretched ahead, empty and familiar, leading back to a house that held more silence than comfort. But something sat wrong in his chest, subtle but persistent, like a memory he couldn't quite place. He glanced in the mirror again. Nothing. Just darkness. Ethan tightened his grip on the wheel, then shook his head lightly. "Not your problem," he murmured. The words sounded flat, like something he'd said too many times before. The truck rolled another 50 yards. Then, without thinking, he slowed. The engine dropped to a low growl as he brought the vehicle to a stop. For a moment, he just sat there, staring at the empty road ahead. Then he sighed, shifted into reverse, and turned the wheel. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as he pulled back the way he came. The headlights swept across the roadside, searching, and then there it was. The dog hadn't left. It stood in nearly the same spot, as if it had known he would return. Ethan pulled up a few feet away and cut the engine this time. The sudden quiet pressed in, thick and complete. He opened the door slowly, boots hitting the pavement with a soft, grounded sound. The night air was colder than he expected, carrying a bite that slipped through his jacket. He took a cautious step forward. "Hey," he said, voice low, steady. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dog's ears twitched slightly, but it didn't back away. If anything, it stepped closer. One step, then another. Slow, deliberate, like it had already made up its mind. Ethan stilled, watching. The distance between them closed to just a few feet. Up close, the dog looked even thinner, its breath shallow but steady, its eyes never leaving his. There was no panic in them, no wild fear, just intent, and something else. Something Ethan couldn't name, but felt all the same. He crouched slightly, extending a hand, palm open. "You hungry?" he asked quietly. The dog didn't lunge, didn't sniff for food. It looked past his hand, past him, toward the road behind, then back at him. Again, as if to say, "You're the one I was looking for." Ethan frowned faintly. "Yeah, okay," he murmured. "That's new." He straightened, glancing back toward his truck. "You can come if you want," he added, almost as an afterthought. "No promises. Just a warm place." He turned and started back toward the vehicle, not checking if the dog followed. He didn't need to. He heard it. Soft paws against pavement. Measured. Certain. By the time he reached the driver's side, the dog was already there, stopping just behind him. Ethan opened the door, then paused, glancing down. "Guess you made up your mind," he said under his breath. The dog didn't react. It simply waited. Ethan gave a small nod, more to himself than anything else, and climbed in. The dog circled once, then settled into the passenger side without hesitation, as if it had done it 100 times before. The engine turned over, breaking the silence again. As the headlights stretched forward, Ethan pulled back onto the road. Neither of them spoke, but something had already shifted. He didn't know it yet. Not fully. But this wasn't just a stray following him home. And somewhere deep beneath the quiet hum of the truck, something long buried inside him stirred, like a door about to be opened after years of staying shut. The truck rolled through the last stretch of empty road, tires humming softly against the worn asphalt as the town slowly gave way to scattered homes and long shadows cast by aging street lamps. Ethan kept his eyes forward, but he was aware of the dog beside him in a way that felt unfamiliar, like a presence that carried weight without making a sound. Most strays paced, shifted, or pressed anxiously against the door. This one did none of that. It sat upright in the passenger seat, steady as a trained companion, its gaze fixed ahead as if it already knew where they were going. The dashboard light painted a faint glow across its face, revealing details Ethan had not seen before. The fur around its muzzle was darker, not just from dirt but from age or something deeper, and there was a faint outline where a collar might have once been, a subtle indentation hidden beneath the tangled coat. "You had a home once," Ethan said quietly, more statement than question. The dog did not turn. Its head, but one ear flicked, acknowledging the sound of his voice without breaking focus. Ethan exhaled slowly, his grip tightening slightly on the wheel. "Yeah, figures." The road curved gently, leading toward a narrow gravel driveway bordered by dry grass that whispered in the wind. The house came into view gradually, a modest single-story place set back from the road, its porch light the only warm thing in sight. It had been years since Ethan had thought of it as anything more than a place to sleep. The windows were dark except for the faint glow in the living room, left on out of habit rather than comfort. He pulled the truck to a stop, the engine idling for a moment before he shut it off completely. Silence settled in again, thicker now, pressing against the edges of the night. Ethan did not move right away. His hands rested on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the house as if seeing it from a distance for the first time. "This is it," he said after a moment. "Not much, but it keeps the weather out." The dog finally turned its head, looking at him directly. Up close, those amber eyes held something steady and unyielding, not curiosity, not fear, but a quiet certainty that made Ethan hesitate. He had seen that look before, years ago, in places far from here, in partners who did not question orders because they trusted what stood beside them. He swallowed lightly, then reached for the door handle. "All right," he murmured. "Come on, then." He stepped out, boots crunching against the gravel, the cool air wrapping around him as he walked toward the porch. Behind him, he heard the soft thud of paws landing on the ground, followed by the steady rhythm of the dog falling into step. Not ahead, not behind, beside him. That alone made something shift in his chest. The porch creaked faintly under his weight as he reached the door, pulling a set of keys from his pocket. He hesitated again, just for a second, before unlocking it and pushing it open. The inside smelled faintly of old wood and something else, something softer, like time that had settled but never fully left. He stepped in and reached for the switch, filling the room with a dim, warm light. The space was simple. A worn couch, a small table, a shelf lined with things that had not moved in months. Nothing out of place, and yet nothing alive. Ethan set his keys down and moved aside, glancing back at the doorway. The dog stood just outside, not crossing the threshold. It did not hesitate out of fear. It waited. Ethan frowned slightly. "You coming in or what?" he asked. The dog's gaze shifted past him, scanning the interior with quiet intensity, as if reading something invisible. Then, slowly, it stepped forward, crossing into the house with deliberate care. The moment its paws touched the wooden floor, something changed. It was subtle, almost nothing, but Ethan felt it. The air seemed to tighten, as if the house itself had taken a breath it had been holding for a long time. The dog moved past him without a sound, walking deeper into the living room, its nose lifting slightly, catching scents that Ethan no longer noticed. It did not explore aimlessly. It followed a path, one that did not make sense. Ethan watched, a faint crease forming between his brows. "Hey," he called softly. "Kitchen's that way." The dog did not respond. It kept moving, slow and certain, until it reached the far end of the room. Then it stopped. Its body stilled. Its ears rose slightly, and its attention fixed on something Ethan had not looked at in a very long time. The hallway. Narrow, quiet, leading to a door that had not been opened in months. Ethan's breath caught, just barely, as the dog took one step closer to it, then another, and then it sat, waiting. The hallway felt longer than Ethan remembered. The light from the living room barely reached it, fading into a dim stretch of shadow that seemed to pull at the edges of the house like a memory refusing to stay buried. He stood still for a moment, watching the dog sit at the threshold of that silence, its posture calm but unyielding, as if it had arrived at the exact place it had intended all along. Ethan let out a slow breath, the sound barely audible in the stillness. "There is nothing down there," he said quietly, though the words carried no real conviction. The dog did not move. Its gaze remained fixed on the closed door at the end of the hallway, a simple wooden door with a brass handle that had not been touched in months, maybe longer. Time had a way of blurring inside that house. Ethan rubbed a hand across the back of his neck, his fingers brushing against the faint scar just below his hairline, a habit he had never quite broken. "You are not missing anything," he added, his voice softer now, as if trying to convince himself. The dog's ears twitched slightly, then it shifted its weight forward by a single inch. Not rushing, not demanding, just waiting. That quiet patience pressed against something deep inside him. Ethan glanced toward the front door, as if considering the easier option. He could walk back, open it, let the dog out, and return to the routine he understood. The house would go back to being silent, predictable, untouched, but his feet did not move. Instead, he found himself taking one step forward into the hallway. The floor creaked beneath his weight, the sound sharp in the stillness. The dog rose immediately, falling in a step beside him again, not leading this time, but staying close, its presence steady like a quiet reassurance he had not asked for. Each step felt heavier than the last. The air grew cooler, carrying a faint scent that had lingered there for too long, something like old paper and cedar wood, mixed with the ghost of a life that had once filled those walls. Ethan's eyes stayed on the door ahead, but his mind drifted somewhere else entirely. He could see her standing there, months ago, her hand resting lightly on the frame, her voice soft but certain. "You do not have to keep everything locked away, Ethan." He had not answered then. He had just nodded, like he always did, and let the moment pass. Now, the memory felt sharper than it should have, like something pulled forward against his will. He stopped a few feet from the door. The dog stopped with him. Silence stretched between them. Ethan reached out, his hand hovering just short of the handle. His fingers trembled, barely noticeable, but enough for him to feel it. "It is just a room," he whispered, the words thin and unsteady. The dog looked up at him, and for a brief second, something shifted in its eyes. Not urgency, not pressure, just presence, as if it understood the weight of what stood behind that door. Ethan swallowed, then let his hand fall back to his side. "Not tonight," he said under his breath. He turned slightly, ready to step away. The moment he did, the dog moved. Not fast, not aggressive, but deliberate. It stepped forward and placed itself directly in front of the door, sitting down again with quiet resolve. Its tail rested against the floor, its posture straight, waiting. Ethan froze. "You have got to be kidding me," he muttered, a faint edge of disbelief in his voice. The dog did not react to the tone. It did not move aside. It simply stayed there, blocking the path, its presence calm but immovable. Ethan let out a short breath, something between frustration and something else he could not quite name. "There is nothing in there that matters anymore," he said, louder this time. The words echoed faintly down the narrow hall. The dog's ears flicked at the sound, but did not look away from the door. Ethan stared at it, his jaw tightening slightly. For a moment, the two of them remained like that, caught between silence and something unspoken. Then the dog did something small. It lowered its head just slightly and let out a soft, almost inaudible breath against the wood of the door. Not a scratch, not a bark, just a quiet exhale like a signal meant only for him. And somehow that was enough. Ethan's shoulders dropped, the tension slipping just a fraction. He stepped forward again, slower this time, until he stood directly beside the dog. His hand rose once more, this time not stopping. His fingers closed around the brass handle, cold beneath his skin. He hesitated for one last second, his eyes closing briefly as if bracing for something unseen. Then, with a steady breath, he turned it. The latch clicked softer than Ethan expected, a small sound that carried far deeper than it should have. The door eased open by an inch, then two, the hinges releasing a slow breath of air that had been sealed away for far too long. It carried a faint scent, something like old cedar, paper, and the quiet trace of a life that had once filled the space with warmth. Ethan did not move at first. His hand remained on the handle, his grip steady but reluctant, as if letting go might change something he was not ready to face. The dog stood beside him, still and patient, its presence grounded, as though it had done its part simply by bringing him here. Ethan pushed the door open wider. The room revealed itself gradually, not in pieces, but as a whole memory waiting to be seen again. Soft lamplight from the hallway reached just enough inside to outline familiar shapes. A neatly made bed, untouched, a dresser with a folded scarf resting at the edge, a small wooden chair near the window, angled slightly as if someone had stood up and never returned. Nothing was disturbed. Nothing was broken. It was exactly as he had left it, and that was what made it harder. Ethan stepped inside slowly, his boots quieter now against the wooden floor, as if the room demanded a different kind of respect. The air felt still but not empty, more like it had been holding on to something, waiting. He exhaled through his nose, the breath unsteady. "I told you," he murmured under his breath. "There is nothing here." But the words felt hollow the moment they left him. Behind him, the dog entered without hesitation, its paws moving softly across the floor. It did not wander. It did not sniff aimlessly. It moved with intention, crossing the room in a straight line toward the far corner near the dresser. Ethan watched, a faint tension returning to his chest. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. The dog stopped near the dresser and lowered its head slightly, its nose hovering just above the surface as if tracing something invisible. Then it shifted, stepping closer to a small wooden box placed neatly beside a framed photograph. Ethan's gaze followed. The photograph was one he knew without needing to look closely. He had turned it face down months ago, unable to meet the quiet smile it held. But now it stood upright again. That alone made him pause. He frowned, stepping closer. "I did not leave it like that," he said, barely above a whisper. The dog remained focused, its attention fixed on the box. It nudged it gently with its nose. Once, then again. Not forceful, just enough to draw attention. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "It is just a box," he said, though his voice had lost its certainty. He crouched slowly, his movements careful, as if the space around him might shift if he moved too quickly. Up close, the box looked exactly as he remembered. Smooth wood, worn at the edges, simple and unremarkable. He had placed it there himself, closed it, left it untouched. His hand hovered above it, hesitation settling in once more. "There is nothing in here I have not already seen," he said quietly. The dog sat down beside him, calm and unwavering. It did not push. It did not rush him. It simply stayed. That quiet presence pressed gently against his resistance. Ethan swallowed, then reached out, his fingers brushing against the lid. It felt colder than he expected. He let out a slow breath and lifted it. Inside, there were a few familiar things. A folded piece of paper, a small chain, and something else. Something he did not remember placing there. His brow furrowed as he leaned closer. "That is not," he started, but the words faded before they formed. The folded paper was different, newer, not aged like the rest. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for it, unfolding it carefully, the edges soft against his fingers. The room seemed to hold its breath. The dog remained still beside him. Ethan's eyes moved across the page slowly, his expression shifting with each line, the tension in his face giving way to something deeper, something raw and unexpected. His breath caught, just barely, as he reached the end. He did not speak. He could not. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something that had waited far too long to be found. The paper trembled slightly in Ethan's hands, not from the air, but from something deeper, something he could no longer hold steady. His eyes moved across the words again, slower this time, as if each line carried weight he had not been ready to bear until now. The handwriting was familiar, not just in shape, but in presence. Soft curves, deliberate strokes, the kind of care that made even the smallest words feel intentional. He had seen it 1,000 times before, on notes left by the coffee maker, on the corner of a grocery list, on the inside of a birthday card that still sat unopened in a drawer somewhere in the house. Ethan, the letter began, simple and unguarded. No distance, no formality, just his name, the way she always said it when she wanted him to listen. His throat tightened. As he continued reading, she wrote about quiet things, about mornings he barely remembered, about the way he used to stand in the doorway, watching the sunrise without saying a word, as if he was waiting for something he could not name. She wrote about the silence that had grown between them, not with blame, but with understanding. "You carried things you never spoke about," the letter said, "and I let you because I thought that was love. But love is not meant to be carried alone." Ethan's breath caught, shallow and uneven. His eyes blurred slightly, but he did not look away. He could not. The words pulled him forward, line by line, deeper into something he had spent months avoiding. She wrote about the room, about how he closed the door one day and never opened it again. "I knew you were not shutting me out," she wrote. "You were trying to protect what you had left of yourself." His hand tightened around the paper, the edges bending slightly beneath his grip. The dog remained beside him, still as ever, its presence quiet but steady, like a silent witness to something that mattered more than either of them fully understood. Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself to keep reading. "If you ever find this," the letter continued, "it means something finally brought you back. And I hope, more than anything, that it was not pain that led you here, but something kinder." He paused there, his eyes lifting slightly as if the room itself might respond. The air felt different now. Not lighter, but not as heavy either. Just present, waiting. His gaze dropped back to the page. The final lines were shorter, simpler. "You do not have to hold on to everything to remember me. And you do not have to stay broken to prove that you loved me." Ethan's chest tightened sharply, the words settling deep, finding places he had long since closed off. His breath faltered, and for a moment, he simply sat there, the letter held loosely in his hands, the weight of it far greater than the paper itself. Silence filled the room again, but it was not the same silence as before. It carried something new, something that felt like space, like the beginning of something he did not yet understand. He lowered the letter slowly, his eyes drifting to the photograph beside the box. This time, he did not look away. Her smile met him gently, unchanged by time, untouched by the distance he had tried to create. He exhaled, a long, unsteady breath that seemed to carry something out of him with it. Not everything, but enough. Beside him, the dog shifted slightly, its shoulder brushing against his arm for the briefest moment. Ethan glanced down at it, his expression softer now, though still uncertain. You knew, he murmured, the words barely audible. You knew this was here. The dog did not answer. It simply remained where it was, calm and grounded, as if the question did not need a response. Ethan looked back at the letter, then at the room around him, taking it in fully for the first time in months. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. He folded the paper carefully, his movements slower now, more deliberate, as if the act itself carried meaning. Then he placed it back in a box, but not the way it had been before. Not hidden, not forgotten, just kept. He rested his hand on the edge of the dresser, his fingers tracing the surface lightly. I'm still here, he said quietly, not to the dog, not to the room, but to something beyond both. And for the first time in a long while, the words did not feel empty. The room did not feel as still anymore. It breathed, faintly, like something long forgotten had finally been allowed to move again. Ethan remained crouched by the dresser for a moment longer, his hand resting near the wooden box, his eyes lingering on the photograph as if committing it to memory in a new way. Not as something lost, but as something that had always been there, waiting without judgment. He let out a slow breath and pushed himself to his feet, the quiet creak of the floor grounding him back in the present. The dog rose with him, smooth and unhurried, its movements steady, as though it had no need to rush what had already begun. Ethan glanced down at it, studying the lines of its face more closely now. There was something familiar in the way it carried itself. Not just calm, but trained, disciplined, the kind of stillness that did not come from instinct alone. You are not just some stray, he murmured, his voice low and thoughtful. The dog met his gaze briefly, then looked away, as if the answer did not need to be spoken. Ethan exhaled quietly and turned toward the doorway. For the first time, he did not hesitate to leave the room. He stepped into the hallway, the dog falling into place beside him once more. The house felt different now. Not brighter, not warmer, but no longer sealed shut. The silence had shifted, carrying something softer, something that did not press against him the way it used to. He moved back into the living room, running a hand across the back of the couch as he passed, his fingers brushing away a thin layer of dust that had gone unnoticed for too long. Guess I've been letting things sit, he said under his breath. The dog moved ahead this time, just a step or two, its nose lifting slightly as it caught another scent. It paused near the small table by the window, where a few unopened envelopes rested in a neat stack. Ethan followed its gaze, his brow furrowing faintly. Those have been there for weeks, he said. Nothing important. The dog did not move away. It stood there quiet, watching. Ethan sighed softly and stepped closer, picking up the top envelope. The paper felt stiff, official. He turned it over, reading the sender's name, and something in his expression shifted again. Not fear, not pain, just recognition. I forgot about this, he admitted quietly. He set it back down without opening it, his hand lingering for a moment before pulling away. One thing at a time, he added, almost as if reminding himself. The dog's attention shifted again, this time toward the kitchen. It walked slowly in that direction, its paws soft against the floor, its body language relaxed now, no longer carrying the same intensity as before. Ethan followed, watching as it stopped near the empty bowl by the sink. He let out a small breath, almost a quiet laugh. Right, he said. Food. He moved to the cabinet, pulling out what little he had, setting it down in the bowl with a measured motion. The dog waited until he stepped back before approaching, lowering its head and eating slowly, not with desperation, but with quiet acceptance. Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely, watching it. You could have run, he said after a moment. There were a dozen chances back on that road. The dog did not look up. It simply continued eating, steady and calm. Ethan nodded slightly, as if that answered something. The clock on the wall ticked faintly, marking time in a way that felt different now. Not something to pass through, but something to move with. After a while, the dog finished and stepped back, its gaze lifting to meet his once more. Ethan pushed off the counter and walked toward the front door, opening it just enough to let the cool night air slip inside. He stood there for a moment, looking out at the quiet stretch of land beyond, the same road he had driven earlier, the same darkness that had not changed. And yet, it did not feel the same. He glanced back over his shoulder. The dog stood in the middle of the room, watching him, waiting without expectation. Ethan nodded once, a small, almost unnoticeable gesture. "You can stay," he said simply. The words landed softly, but they carried weight. Not just for the dog, for him. He closed the door gently, the latch settling into place with a quiet finality. And for the first time in a long while, the house did not feel like something he was surviving inside. It felt like something he might actually live in again. The night settled deeper around the house, stretching quiet and wide beyond the walls. But inside, something had shifted into a softer rhythm. Ethan moved through the living room with slower steps now, not out of hesitation, but awareness, as if each part of the space had regained its place in a life he had not realized he was still allowed to live. The dog lay near the center of the room, front paws stretched forward, head resting lightly between them, its breathing steady and even. It did not sleep fully. Its ears still caught the smallest movements, the subtle creak of wood, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the rhythm of Ethan's steps crossing from one end of the house to the other. Ethan paused near the window, glancing out into the darkness, his reflection faint against the glass. He studied it for a moment. The same face, the same lines, but something behind his eyes had eased, just slightly, like a weight had been shifted rather than removed. He exhaled and turned back toward the room. "You got a name?" he asked quietly. The dog lifted its head, ears tilting forward, attentive but calm. Ethan gave a small nod, as if expecting that much. "Yeah, I figured." He walked over, lowering himself onto the couch with a slow, deliberate motion, the cushions sinking beneath his weight with a familiar, worn comfort. The dog watched him for a moment, then rose and crossed the room, each step measured, until it stopped just a few feet away. It did not jump up. It did not assume. It waited. Ethan leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees, studying the animal in silence. Up close, the details were clearer now. The faint scar along the shoulder, partially hidden beneath the coat. The posture, balanced and ready even at rest. The eyes, steady and aware, not searching for direction, but already holding it. "You have been trained," Ethan said quietly. "Military, maybe, or close to it." The dog's expression did not change, but there was a subtle shift in its stance, a recognition not of the words, but of the tone behind them. Ethan nodded once, as if that confirmed something. "Thought so." He leaned back slightly, one hand lifting, hesitating for a fraction of a second before reaching forward. His fingers brushed against the top of the dog's head, slow and careful, giving it the chance to pull away. It did not. The fur was rougher than he expected, but warm, alive in a way that grounded him instantly. He let his hand rest there for a moment longer than necessary. "You can stay," he repeated, softer this time. The dog shifted slightly, lowering itself to the floor again, closer now, its body angled toward him, not guarding, not claiming, just present. The quiet stretched on, but it no longer felt empty. It felt shared. After a while, Ethan reached for the remote on the table, turning on the small television more out of habit than interest. The screen flickered to life, casting a soft blue glow across the room, filling the silence with low voices and distant music that he did not fully hear. His attention drifted, not to the screen, but to the steady presence beside him. "You picked a strange place," he said after a moment, his voice calm, almost reflective. "Not much going on here." The dog's ear flicked at the sound, but it did not move otherwise. Ethan allowed a faint, almost invisible smile to touch the corner of his mouth. Then again, he added quietly, "Maybe that is the point." The hours passed without him noticing the exact moment when the night deepened into something quieter still. At some point, the television became nothing more than background light, and the weight in his chest, the one he had carried for so long, seemed to settle into something less sharp. Not gone, just manageable. He leaned back fully against the couch, one arm resting along the side, his breathing slowing as the exhaustion of the day finally caught up with him. The dog remained where it was, eyes half closed but alert, its presence steady like a silent promise. Not demanding anything, not asking to be understood, just there. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan did not feel like he was alone in the quiet. He closed his eyes, not in escape, but in rest, the kind that comes when something inside you finally decides it is safe enough to let go, even if only for a little while. Morning came quietly, not with noise or urgency, but with a slow, gentle light that slipped through the edges of the window and settled across the room like something patient. Ethan stirred on the couch, his breathing shifting first, then his shoulders as the weight of sleep gave way to awareness. For a moment, he did not move. He simply lay there, eyes still closed, listening. The house was not silent anymore. It held small sounds now. The faint creak of wood adjusting to the change in temperature. The distant call of a bird outside. And closer, steady and calm, the quiet rhythm of another presence breathing nearby. Ethan opened his eyes slowly, the light soft against them. He did not need to turn his head to know the dog was still there. He could feel it, grounded, unmoved. When he finally sat up, the room came into focus around him, familiar but no longer distant. The television had gone dark sometime during the night. The air felt cooler, fresher, and there, a few feet away, the dog lifted its head, already awake, already aware. Their eyes met for a brief second, and something passed between them. Not a command, not a question, just recognition. Ethan ran a hand over his face, exhaling slowly as he leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "You stayed," he said quietly. The dog rose smoothly, stretching once, then stepping closer, its movements relaxed but attentive. Ethan watched it, a faint shift in his expression, something softer than the night before. "Guess that makes two of us," he added under his breath. He stood, moving toward the kitchen with a steady pace, no longer avoiding the small routines that once felt meaningless. The dog followed, not tightly, not anxiously, but with the same measured presence, as if it understood the space now, understood him. Ethan reached for a glass, filling it with water, the sound simple and grounding. He paused, glancing toward the table where the unopened envelope still rested. For a moment, he just looked at it. Then, without hesitation, he walked over and picked it up. The paper felt the same, but he did not. He opened it carefully, scanning the contents, his brow tightening slightly, then easing. Not everything needed to be faced at once. But this time, he did not put it back untouched. He folded it again and set it aside with intention. A small step, but real. Behind him, the dog moved toward the back door, its nose lifting slightly, catching the morning air that slipped through the edges. It stood there, waiting, not asking, just aware. Ethan noticed, a faint nod forming as he crossed the room. "Yeah," he said softly. "You probably want out." He opened the door, and the cool morning air rolled in, carrying the scent of earth and open space. The dog stepped outside, its paws touching the ground with quiet certainty, as if this place, too, was already known to it in some way. Ethan followed, stepping onto the porch, the wood cool beneath his boots. The land stretched out in front of him, unchanged, the same quiet road in the distance, the same fields resting under the early light. But it did not feel the same. The dog moved a few feet ahead, then stopped, turning back to look at him. Not far, not leaving, just enough distance to remind him that movement was still possible. Ethan took a slow breath, filling his lungs fully this time, the air crisp and clean. He stepped forward, off the porch, onto the ground he had walked past 100 times without really seeing. The dog waited until he did, then continued, slow and steady, leading just enough to guide, but never pulling ahead. Ethan watched it for a moment, then gave a small, almost quiet shake of his head, a hint of disbelief in his expression. "You really are something," he murmured. The dog did not respond. It simply walked, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan followed, not because he had to, not because there was nowhere else to go, but because something ahead felt worth stepping toward. The morning stretched forward, unhurried, as if the world itself had decided there was no need to rush what was quietly unfolding. Ethan walked a few steps behind the dog, his boots pressing softly into the dry earth, each step more certain than the last. The air carried the scent of open land, faint traces of grass and dust warming under the early sun, and somewhere in the distance, the low hum of a passing truck reminded him that life beyond this moment was still moving, still waiting. But for once, he did not feel pulled by it. The dog slowed near the edge of the property, where the land dipped slightly before meeting the long stretch of road. It stopped there, standing still, its body outlined by the soft gold of morning light. Ethan came to a halt beside it, his gaze following the same direction. The road looked the same as it had the night before. Empty, quiet, endless in its own way. He let out a slow breath, his hands resting loosely at his sides. "This is where I found you," he said, his voice calm, almost reflective. The dog turned its head slightly, looking up at him, not as if confirming the statement, but as if acknowledging something deeper beneath it. Ethan held that gaze for a moment, then looked back out at the road. "Or maybe," he added quietly, "this is where you found me." The words settled between them without resistance. No need to question them. No need to explain. The dog shifted its weight, then stepped forward just once, its nose lifting slightly into the breeze, catching something only it could sense. Then it stopped again. It did not go further. It did not leave. It simply stood there, as if drawing a line between what had been and what could be. Ethan watched it, a faint understanding beginning to take shape in his chest. Not all things that guide you are meant to stay ahead of you. Some are meant to walk beside you. He glanced down, studying the dog more carefully now, seeing not just the worn coat or the quiet strength in its posture, but the intention that had carried it all the way to his door. "You could have kept going," he said softly. "Plenty places out there. Better ones, probably." The dog did not move. It remained exactly where it was, steady and grounded, its presence answering in a way words never could. Ethan nodded once, a small motion, but final in its meaning. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them until he stood shoulder to shoulder with the animal, both of them facing the same open stretch of road. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something steady, something earned. After a moment, Ethan reached down, his hand resting against the dog's neck, fingers pressing gently into the thick fur. This time, there was no hesitation, no second-guessing, just contact, real and certain. The dog leaned into it slightly, not seeking, not demanding, just accepting. Ethan's gaze lifted toward the horizon, his eyes narrowing slightly against the growing light. "I do not know where this goes," he admitted quietly, "but I am done standing still." The words carried no weight of promise, no grand declaration, just truth, simple and enough. The dog shifted beside him, its stance aligning with his, ready without urgency, present without question. Ethan let his hand fall back to his side, then took a step forward. The dog moved with him, not leading, not following. Together, the road stretched ahead, unchanged and uncertain, but it no longer felt empty. And as they walked, the distance between where he had been and where he was going did not feel like something to fear. It felt like something he could finally cross. The house stood behind them, quiet and open, no longer a place of waiting, but a place he could return to. And ahead, the world remained wide, carrying no guarantees, only the quiet possibility that sometimes the things we think we rescue are the very ones that lead us back to ourselves. A wounded Marine, living in quiet isolation, finds his life unexpectedly changed when a starving German shepherd follows him home, leading him not just through the doors of his house, but into the parts of his heart he has kept locked away for far too long. In this deeply emotional journey inspired by powerful animal stories, the bond between the Marine and the loyal dog unfolds slowly through silence, memory, and small acts of trust, revealing how even the most broken routines can be reshaped by presence alone, as the dog guides the Marine toward a forgotten room filled with memories of loss. A hidden letter becomes the turning point, transforming grief into understanding and opening a path toward healing that feels both intimate and real. This cinematic narrative stands among the most moving animal stories, where loyalty is not loud, but steady, and where a single quiet companion can restore something no one else could reach, through carefully woven moments of stillness, reflection, and subtle connection. The story captures the essence of animal stories that focus on emotional truth rather than spectacle, reminding us that healing often begins with the smallest gestures. As morning arrives, the Marine steps outside, not as a man escaping his past, but as someone ready to move forward, guided by a dog who never needed words to show him the way. This heartfelt piece belongs to a growing world of animal stories that highlight resilience, companionship, and the quiet miracles that happen when two souls find each other at the right moment. Without relying on dramatic extremes, the story remains grounded and authentic, making it one of those rare animal stories that resonate deeply with viewers seeking meaning, comfort, and inspiration. In the end, what begins as a simple encounter becomes something far greater, a reminder that sometimes the ones we think we are saving are the very ones who save us. A theme that continues to define the most unforgettable animal stories. Character 1, a white male Marine in his mid-30s, rugged features, short military haircut, light stubble, wearing a worn tactical jacket and plain shirt, front-facing portrait, natural lighting, realistic texture, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration, cinematic tone. Character 2, a full-body German Shepherd dog, adult age, lean but slightly underweight, sable coat with dark saddle, alert ears, amber eyes, standing naturally, realistic fur detail, front-facing view, natural lighting, no cartoon, no CG, no illustration, cinématique réaliste.